This is a call to order of a special meeting of the Personnel, Pension, and Insurance Committee of the MDC, Monday, March 17th, 2025. Mr. Secretary or Clerk, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Are there any public comments relative to agenda items? Once again, are there any public comments relative to agenda items? There being none, we'll move to item 3. Independent consumer advocate comments and questions relative to agenda items?
None, thank you.
Okay. We move to item 4, approval of meeting minutes of January 6, 2025.
Motion to approve?
Yep.
Any questions, deletions, or whatever? Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Passes, okay. Item 5, report from DeHaab and Associates. Mr. Lee?
Good afternoon. So as we sit here today, March 17th, obviously the book which captures the fourth quarter seems a little bit dated, but I'll go over the book and then I'll go over the single handout which captured January and February. So do we have does everyone have the books?
And they're over there on the table there. I don't think they were distributed.
Sorry, I didn't distribute them. Mea culpa. So there's a bigger book which captures the pension fund, and there's a thinner book which is the OPEB plan. And I'll start with the thicker book. If I could ask you to flip to page 4 for me. Frankly, page 4 for both the thicker book and the thinner book will be the same charts. But if you look in the upper left-hand corner of the page, this is just to frame for us what the book captured, which is, again, the fourth quarter. And typically what we do is we compare the fourth quarter and third quarter statistics. If you look at those two columns, I think the first row does speak to the slowdown that we're seeing in the economy, at least at the end of the year, slightly from a 3.1% to a 2.3% annualized pace. And before all the things that happened this year, what I would have said is that really the 2.3% annualized growth pace is reasonable. In fact, if you look over the long-term growth rate of the U.S., you're kind of about a 2.53% annualized pace. So that's fine. After this, as you all know, within the past, call it month and change, there have been some on-again and off-again tariffs that we've implemented on, you pick it, Mexico, China, Canada, and perhaps there will be some reciprocal tariffs also starting on April 2nd. That has caused a little bit of volatility both in the stock market as well as less surety on the part of corporations as to what the environment for the economy will be on a go-forward basis. So there's a concern that perhaps there may be a slowdown in the overall economy. So at the beginning of the year, it didn't seem like recession was really in the realm of possibility, and now it's kind of morphed up to where it's almost a coin flip maybe at the second half of the year that we may go into a recession. That's all still to be determined, though. The unemployment rate here you see is somewhere in the neighborhood of right around 4%. It's come down a little bit since this report. That's a positive number because, again, this is something I've expressed at most meetings. A 4.1% or a 3.9% in that vicinity over the long term, that has always been considered full employment for the U.S. So we are keeping pace at a reasonable level of employment. The other thing I'll highlight for you is CPI, which is that next row down. As you know, CPI is an expression of inflation, and although it's a little bit hotter than we saw in the prior quarter, still sub 3%, reasonable pace, a little bit a little bit hotter than what the Fed would like, because the Fed would like at least a 2% type of number, but still considering where we were at the peak of COVID, over 9%, that's a good number. And the Fed funds rate, as you all may recall, in the fourth quarter, the Fed did decrease rates 2 times, 25 basis points each, 0.5% altogether. So that was in the past. Where we are today in the economy, as I mentioned to you, really what's driving it is volatility driven by policies around tariffs and trade. So that's depending on the day, depending on the week, there is some volatility regarding that. And because of that, the markets have taken a little bit of a downturn, although on Friday and today we're up a lot. Still, relative to the peak, we are down, call it about 8%, give or take. Having said that, we are still doing better than we were at the end of last year. Upper right-hand corner of the page, just to highlight for you that it was a good, another positive quarter for equities. The second row from the top on the right-hand side represents the S&P 500, which for the quarter gained 2.4%. As a reminder, the S&P 500 captures large stocks primarily. Roughly about 87% of the stocks in the S&P 500 are large cap stocks. Large cap is generally any stock whose market capitalization is greater than 15 billion, let's say. And over the trailing 12 months, that brought that equity index up to 25%. So that's a big number. In fact, we had 2 years back-to-back of over 20%. It's been a while since we saw that. Last time we saw that was in the mid-90s. And before that, it was the mid-1950s. So you don't see it often. What you do see also with back-to-back returns like that, obviously, it's going to be a more modest return typically the year after, which is kind of what we expect this year to be a very muted return for equities. And finally, on this page, bottom left-hand corner of the page, just to highlight for you that it really was a very good stock market, at least for calendar year 2024, driven by large cap growth-oriented stocks. And what I mean by that is, if you look at those two squares, the one that's labeled trailing year, and then those columns of growth, core value, simply put, large cap growth trumps everything else. You see that all of growth outperformed core, outperformed value, large cap beat mid cap beat small cap. And that was really the story of 2024, the Mag 7, if you will, and NVIDIA.
David,
Yes, sir.
what's your thinking on that growth sector? What do you think was driving that? And is that something that there's going to be a sufficient momentum to maybe carry us
Sure.
through the year or not?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear you because there was a little bit of noise, but I think you're saying why is the market going down now?
No, I'm saying is if you look at the large caps.
Yes.
Okay, they have really been sort of driving the market. Is that momentum going to be something that we can look to be relying upon, or is that something, given all of the dislocations in the marketplace at this time, that's going to drop off and we're not quite sure where we should be going or what we should be looking at?
I think the not quite sure part is probably where we're living in right now, because the large names that people have been purchasing, Apple, NVIDIA, Tesla, they've all taken a haircut. When you look at their valuations, with the exception of NVIDIA, the other two can arguably be a little bit expensive. And what you have seen is smaller cap names, as well as stocks outside the US actually do a little bit better than what we have domestically. So a diversified portfolio is probably the best way to go this year. Although over the long term, still large growth-oriented stocks, I think, are probably a good bet. But for us, we do have representation across market capitalization and both domestic and international. So we are participating in that to the best extent. If I could ask you to turn to page 9 for me, please. And this is a page that you all are probably familiar with. This is the performance summary page, which captures the return for the fund across different periods. And as a reminder, that first row there just is our gross return. So for the quarter, again, that captures October, November, December, the fund was up fractionally, which doesn't sound like a whole heck of a lot. But considering that our shadow index and policy indices were both negative fractionally, that means we actually did quite well. And as an additional form of evidence, the number in parentheses, 10th percentile, means that we beat 90% of the other public funds out there. So as a reminder, the shadow index and policy index is what we would have gotten if our asset allocation was exactly in line with the policy, while the shadow index, and using index funds, while the shadow index is using our actual asset allocation, we just use index funds, that's what the return would have been. So because of our outperformance by active management, for the quarter, we beat the shadow index by 60 basis points or 0.6%, and the policy index, so additional to that, our allocation was a little bit better, and we beat the policy index by 90 basis points or almost 1%. Short term is fine. Really, what we try to emphasize is longer term numbers. But before we get to the longer term numbers, you see that that helped us year to date get a return of 13.7, top decile. Trailing 3 years, 3.7, roughly top quartile. But 5 years and past 10 years, 8.2 and 8.5% annualized. And those are top quartile returns. Very nice. Additionally, you'll notice that every number in the top row outperforms every number for the policy index and almost every number for the shadow index. So good, consistent outperformance over the different trailing periods. And really, we're getting that return without taking a huge amount of risk. And the reason why I say that is the asset allocation in the upper right-hand corner, as you see, roughly a third of the portfolio was large cap, which is indexed for us. And then roughly about 12% each in mid cap and small cap. Mid cap is indexed, small cap is active. International, about 14%, that is also active. And then when you add up all of the other components, real estate, timber, domestic, fixed income, and cash, that comes out to, call it roughly about 31, 33%-ish. So about 2/3 stocks, 1/3 not stocks. That asset allocation is what has driven this performance and that's actually relatively conservative in the universe of public funds out there. A lot of public funds have morphed more into equity allocations and are close to about 70 or 75% equities. Last part of performance summary I'll highlight for you is if you look at that first column, you see large cap and mid cap, those numbers were in line with the benchmark because those are two index funds. Small cap is active, although it matched up for the quarter. If you have your eyes go all the way to the right-hand column, they did quite well, outperforming the benchmark by about 4% annualized. So that's very good. International, we have an active component there. We lost a lot less there. So we lost 3.3, but the benchmark lost 8.1%. So an active manager did their job by beating the benchmark by almost 5%. The longer term number here is a little bit muddled. I'll get to that in a couple of slides because this combines older performance with the allocation just with one manager now, and we'll highlight their strength in a couple of slides. Real estate was positive, timber was flat, and then fixed income for us was off a little bit, but off a lot less than the benchmark. Bottom right-hand corner of the page just shows us that we began the quarter about $273 million. Net withdrawals is what really drove us down to about $269 million at the end of the quarter or at the end of the year. Page 11, please. And this, again, also is a page that you all should be familiar with as well. We feel that each of the pages that we highlight tell a different part of the story for the entire portfolio. In this case, what we're trying to show is slow and steady wins over the long term. And what I mean by that is that the dark line there is the corpus of the fund over this 20 years. And you notice that the trend, even though it's not straight, goes up into the northeast quadrant. So we're making money over the long term despite market volatility. And in terms of numbers, that portfolio grew from about $121 million up to where we are today to 200, close to $70 million, even though we've taken out more than $150 million. And if you look at cash flow, if this portfolio hadn't made any money, the portfolio would have been gone by 2022. So this is a testament to the proof of compounding and having a good diversified portfolio. And of course, the dotted line right in the middle of the page is if we had achieved the assumption rate over the intervening 20 years, that's where we would have been. So obviously, we've done a little bit better than that. So that's a good thing. Page 12, please. This is the page that I said I would get to in a moment, because what it does, it puts names to the components that we saw a moment ago, and also decomposes what we have for real estate. But you'll notice that the first row, the composite, is identical to what we saw for the total fund return on page 7. All those numbers are identical. Now we put a name to the index funds. Fidelity S&P 500 is our large cap index fund. Rumline is our mid cap index fund. And of course, across the board, all those numbers in black mirror the numbers in blue because they're index fund returns. Wellington is our active small cap manager. And frankly, Wellington has just crushed it. They've done a very nice job, which is why they're still with us, right? So if you look at the 5-year number, they're at 11.2, while the bogey was at 7.4. Similarly, actually, if you look over the 10 years, they're at 11.4, while the bogey's at 7.8. So they've done a fine job. Hardman Johnston is our lone international manager. And they've done nicely also, especially over the long term. So the longer term number there of 5 years, they're kind of in line, beating the benchmark by 10 basis points, but that puts them in the top third of the universe. And then since September of 2018, outperforming the benchmark there as well by 160 basis points, or 1.6% annualized. So that's very nice. Then we have Intercontinental, Madison 3, Madison 5 are real estate components, all of which are positive, most of which are exceeding their benchmarks over the long term. FIA is our timber manager, who's been additive, especially as a proxy for bonds. And then, of course, for our bond allocation, we have a piece with Goodwin, a piece with Aetna. On a combined basis there, you see that over every single period, they are outperforming the bogey. So that was the state of the portfolio at the end of the quarter. I also handed out a single sheet which captures the month of January and February, so that you see for the most recent month, the pension plan lost 1.1%. However, for the year to date, we were slightly positive 1.6 versus a bogey at 1.4. And more importantly, the market value being at about $279 million versus the $268 million that we saw. As you know, there has been some market volatility up and down, and right now, as we sit, we're about $272 million. So not so far off from where we were at the end of the year, which is actually a reasonable return considering, again, the volatility that we've been experiencing. Before I move on to the OPEB, I have opportunity to answer any questions that you might have on the pension fund, whether the prior quarter or the current.
Just a quick question on page, one with the graph. Oh, yeah, so that's 11, I guess, right?
Page 11, yes.
Yeah, so you said, that the dotted line that then falls off the map in 22, that's basically if it was, the principal would have disappeared then. And there's no, like you said, there's no interest, no compounded interest, right? So the principal alone would have just disappeared.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I got that right. Thank you.
You got it. Yeah, so that's a zero line, which means that you got no return. Basically, whatever money you had.
Spent it, and it's gone.
Exactly.
Yeah, so-
Because it's a cash flow line, right? We have more money going out than we have money coming in, which is the status for most pension plans out there. And of course, because of that, you're going to run out of money if your money's not making money.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If there are no other questions, I'm going to do a brief overview of the OPEB, as the OPEB book is a lot more simple in its asset allocation. And we're trying to really just hit singles with the OPEB fund because, as you know, we have a reasonable amount of cash flow that goes out from it. So for this plan, if you could flip to page 7 for me. And we had a very nice quarter here as well by only losing 0.2%, bringing the year-to-date very close to what we saw for the other fund at 13.7, 3 years, 3%. And the OPEB plan has a smaller time horizon as prior to really 21, it was more pay-as-you-go. But once we established this OPEB fund, we changed the asset allocation to try to get a long-term target. The benefit from that really was that the liability, which is the actuary side of the business, but the liability then could be assigned to something that was more aligned with this type of asset allocation as opposed to a very low return expectation. As you know, reverse, if you have a very low return expectation, your liability would have been a lot higher. So this framework helps by giving you a more reasonable type of return expectation based on the asset allocation, which is reasonable. Since March of 2021, our fund gained 6.1%. And really, the lion's share of this is indexed. So it's pretty much just asset allocation that gets you a return here. Upper right-hand corner of the page, similar type of asset allocation. You see that we are targeting about a 35% bond or non-equity, to the rest being equity here. So you have about half of the money with large cap, about 12.5% with mid cap, 5% with small cap, about 12% international, and the rest was either fixed income or cash. This asset allocation will change in the handout because we did get a cash infusion, and the majority of that stayed in cash as we allowed for payments to come out of it, and we did move a little bit of money into the stock market recently with the market volatility. But you'll see at the bottom portion of the page that the portfolio did decline in value because we had withdrawals from $15.4 million to about $13.5 million, and that's primarily because we had almost $2 million in withdrawals. If I could ask you to flip to page 9. And page 9, it's a shorter time frame, as I mentioned to you, and you could see that there are dramatic rise in asset value, and that's just simply because when we had a contribution to the corpus, that's really what's driven the size of the portfolio. So we had a contribution in 2022, we had a contribution in 2023, and then 2025, at the beginning of the first quarter, you'll see a spike up in market value from a contribution as well. And then starting really from 2024, we started using this fund for more payments, which is why you saw a dramatic decrease in market value after we had the contribution, because as you pay off your obligations, the decline in value is really driven by that.
Can I just?
Yes.
I got a question. Thank you for, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you, but.
Not at all, please.
This is a really important point. So net contributions is the contributions less the payouts?
Correct.
Okay, so there were contributions. Here it shows a negative amount. There were contributions,
Yes.
but the payouts were $2 million more than what the contributions
Correct.
were.
For the quarter, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And page 10, as we did similarly for the pension fund, here you'll notice that pretty much everything is indexed. Index fund for large cap, mid cap, and small cap, and international are all with Fidelity. And then with the bond fund, it's just Vanguard. So again, for this fund, it's really just about asset allocation. We're trying to keep costs very modest here, and we're not trying to be heroes. We're just trying to make sure that we're hitting singles and getting the return that the asset allocation is going to generate for us. That single page handout, yes.
The contributions to the OPEB fund, those come just from the MDC,
Correct.
not from the employees.
I don't know. That's not my purview. That's correct. I've been told that's correct.
Okay. But didn't we at one time have contributions coming from the employees?
Yes, we did.
Okay, and
We
that,
did. We did. I mean, it was 0.5% of the payroll of new employees when it was entered into the contract originally. The existing employees weren't going to pay it, but all new employees are going to pay it. I think the last time we got a contribution, Scott, you can, if you got it or somebody else got it, the last time we did it was about $600,000, I think.
300, yeah,
I
300.
thought it was over $500,000 the last
Yeah,
time.
it was Scott Chilson. So it was initially the contribution was negotiated with all unions at 0.5%. And then we went up to 1%. I think that was 2018. Correct me if I'm wrong, 2018. But in the negotiations in 2018, so remember, whether it's 300,000 or 6, we were collecting 600. Let's say it's $600,000 from our employees for OPEB. In our negotiations in 2018, we negotiated the elimination of OPEB liability for all of our employees' spouse as part of our negotiation, which saved the MDC $40 million in OPEB liability for the next 20 years. So that was part of that negotiation, Commissioner, that yes, we gave up the 1%, which is $600,000 a year, but by removing the spouse as part of the negotiation, the MDC saved $40 million in liability for. So all of our employees that have that were hired after 2018, their spouse will not have medical benefits in retirement. So that was the give and take on that negotiation.
I understand that, Scott. My own question about it, this is not really for you. My only question about it was $600,000 a year, not $600,000 a block. So
Yes, it was six. It was
out over
whatever the number was. It was per year.
Yeah, when
Yes.
it went out over 20 years, you're talking about 20 times 600,000. So
Sure.
I can see there was some saving, but my concern over that was we had a vehicle to have our employees contribute to the OPEB, which they agreed was an important thing for
Sure.
them. I understand that we saved dollars in that, but over time, I still think it's something that worth talking about again, because I think that having the employees contribute to something that's a benefit really only for them, it doesn't benefit the rest of the district, it just benefits them, would be good to have them contribute to. But maybe we can do that at some point in the future, but thank you for that. So there wasn't any contribution beyond our contribution that you talked about, which is the net contribution is minus $2 million over the last one. So I got it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
okay, I'm sorry, Dave. So is this something we have to discuss with the actuaries or what? I'm asking Commissioner Salemi. Is this something that we discuss with the actuaries or what? With whom do we discuss this? This whole notion of looking or reviewing, taking a look at this notion of.
Yeah,
whether or not we have-
I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, what we discussed with the actuaries is the rate at which we're going to, contribute to them. As we're talking about, is Milliman still doing that for us, or is somebody know, or they did that? They did it before. I'm not sure that they're still doing it.
Our actuary is now USI.
Yeah,
Okay, it was Milliman before? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
okay.
So yeah, they're gonna calculate the actual rate of contribution to it. So
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No, please. The February update just shows that the market value did climb up to close to $21 million, and that's simply because there was a cash infusion, and that's what really threw off all the asset allocation, because obviously we have a large chunk of it in cash. Didn't want to put all the money to work with all the volatility that we had, and frankly, we're trying to keep about $4 million left in cash just because we know we're going to have reasonable cash calls to this account over the period. So we did implement putting $1 million more into large cap stocks, and then within the next couple of weeks, we'll probably do another $1 million, and then another $1 million after that. And then the asset allocation will get closer in line. But The OPEB's the easier one to understand, if you will, because it's all indexed, just asset allocation, trying to get consistent type of returns. Nothing crazy here. But happy to address anything you might have with the both the pension fund as well as the OPEB.
Any questions for David?
Yes. So, and you can help me out personally too. So what do you think about the next quarter? I mean, what are we, where are we going in the next quarter? I mean,
You know, the reason why I chuckle about that is because honestly, at the end of the year, I'm looking at my kids' education funds. I'm like, man, I think I should just put this all in cash. And of course, I didn't do it, right? And subsequently, the markets kept going up right into the middle of February, and then they come down a bit. I think it's pretty clear that we're going to have volatility. That's it. That's the word of the day. Because April 2nd is going to roll around. We just don't know what's going to happen with tariffs. And I'm pretty surprised that we're actually having a bump right now because there was nothing that changed really on Friday. It's just that the markets hit that 10% correction across all the different indices. You had some buying that took place. Some of the tariffs that were supposed to be implemented haven't been implemented, and all of a sudden there was a relief rally. And then we're seeing that again today still, so that's a good thing. But I wouldn't be surprised if we have a lot of this back and forth for the next several months.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Once again, any questions for David? As always, David, thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Very much.
Item 6, discussion of employee climate survey.
This is Scott Jolson. I don't know if you want me to give you the same update, Commissioner, as I gave at the board meeting. Nothing much has changed. As I mentioned, I've met with 10 groups identified in the survey. There were 4 groups actually identified. We broke those groups down into 10 over a 2-week period. I met with all 10 of those groups. And I have 5 more to meet with. I'm planning to meet with them 1 this week and then 4 next week. And we are working on action plans based on the input from the survey and from the meetings that I've had with staff. The plan will be for, once the action plans are drafted, we will actually meet with those same groups by department to go through the action plans, give the staff a chance to hear the action plan, feedback on the action plan. We're also going to be coordinating amongst departments action plans because there's a lot of interactive issues between departments to make sure that we're catching all those issues. And then we will be presenting those to the employees. We have had a number of issues that rose that we've already had meetings on, more business processes issues that seem to be creating issues for employees, departments not properly talking to each other. So trying to effectuate a more effective communication. Communication was a big issue, as you know, as you saw at the presentation. Remind everybody, we've met with, of the 288 employees that actually filled out the survey, 67% of the employees, we've talked to about half of them so far, and we will talk to the rest of them, as I mentioned, next week. I mentioned at the board meeting, we're going to be utilizing Paul. He's going to be developing us a leadership a training program, meeting with management, all levels of management, including 1026, because 1026 is supervision, and it's important for those unionized supervisors to have that same leadership training. And again, we're also going to be doing some training on generational communications amongst different generations. We've talked a lot about that over the years, and if we remember in prior to 2015, one of our biggest challenges with people within the union was the older generation employee, and the quote, new Gen Z, and now Gen Z is, not picking Gen Zs, but Gen Zs are up to 28 years old. We saw a significant change in mindset in terms of overtime. So a lot of our older generation were used to get as much overtime as possible. The younger generation is looking for work-life balance. Work-life balance was a major discussion point across every department. And so the younger generation is not really looking for as much overtime because they're looking for work-life balance. So there's some challenges within the union, and then between the other unions and the unions. And I'll give you an example. Prior to 2015, before we developed a multitasking job description, and is why we developed a multitasking job description, the older generation, the union contract says you get double time if you work past 2 o'clock at night, and then you use your sick time for the next day, and you can have the day off, so you don't have to come in. There was another preceding rule that was you get time and a half, but you don't have to use your sick time. You get the day off free. So the older generation wanted the time and a half so they could save their sick time, and the newer generation wanted double time. They wanted the money. They were okay with using their sick time. So that clash within the union. So you got some people, 184 want this, and another group in 184 want this. Then you have 1026, which is trying to supervise getting the work done, who's challenged gets caught in the middle. And the end result was, at the time, I said to the union presidents, this is an internal issue for you to resolve, but it's a generational issue that we have to address as a union, as an MDC, because if you don't address it, someday the generation gap will be such that Generation Z is running this company and no one will want to work overtime. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have contractors in here repairing your water main breaks and your sewer collapses in the middle of the night. So we need to find a happy medium there to resolve that internal struggle within the union. And then we have to also make sure that our unions together, the three unions, are in agreement because they work independently as a union, but they have to work together as a team to get the work done. So we're going to be working on a bunch of short-term, long-term fixes and wins for the departments. We will be working once we have some action plans, we'll be going back and meeting with the departments and the staff to explain to them what we're proposing, that what could be solutions to some of their concerns, and we'll try and do everything we can to address those issues. So with that, I mean, that's all I have at this point to report. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Mr. Salemi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not so much a question. There's Scott's comments are appreciated. I appreciate that we know, beginning to know some of the actual communications, regarding the climate study itself. But what I've been looking for since we got the climate study, all we got was the study, and. It's sort of a comprehensive understanding of what did this study tell us. We haven't gotten that. We haven't been, the consultant hasn't really told us what the study means, okay? You got 4 major categories and 10 categories that sort of grow out of those 4. And, but what did it say about those things? And when we looked at the contract, I believe, unless something changed, I believe that we bought like a year's worth of them being able to manipulate their software to answer questions for us and so forth. At least that's the way that I remember, the contract, the discussion about the contract. And I'd like to see, Scott, not so much the anecdotal, like on the ground little details of this stuff, but a comprehensive review. I mean, what did it say about the MDCs? How, you know, the relationship between the district and its employees? What did it say about it? You said that the communications was a big thing, okay? So, all right, so what did it say about it? Did it say that we need improvement in this area or that area? That's what I can't see by just looking at the report. I don't know. And I think that if we had, a comprehensive kind of presentation that said, well, here's the things that actually got developed with the answers that we got, I think that would be, it'd be helpful to me to understand that that the money we spent on this is worthwhile. It sounds like it is, because it sounds like your management and staff is, working with the employees now to address some of the issues. I just don't know what the issues are, and I'd like to know what they are, and I'd like to know if there's something that the district board can do to make this better. I mean, that's why we did the climate study. I mean, maybe there's something that we can get involved in that will, improve the relationship, with our employees. So, is there some way that we can get, the consultant and our staff together to basically show commissioners what obviously the staff has seen, some, the major categories, and which way the arrows point as far as improvements or whatever? Can we get that? I'm asking our chair if we can, try to discuss that and see how we can make that happen.
So my understanding, just a minute, please. It's my understanding that there are two people who are remote who have comments or who have questions.
Commissioners Curry and Commissioner Adel.
Commissioner Curry?
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, forgive me, I'm a little rusty using this from outside the meeting room. Listening to Commissioner Salemi, I pretty much agree with everything he said, and I think that we should maybe start. And my point is, I think Amazing Workplace should come before the committee, whether it be live or Zoom, either way, but so that they're better prepared and they don't have to come back twice. Maybe we can develop a series of questions or concerns that we have and present that to them, so that at a future meeting they can respond, and of course any other questions we may have outside of wanting specific responses to the study itself. But I certainly think the committee should have that, and actually it would be an important concept and to move forward with any improvements. Thank you.
Commissioner Adel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would also agree with both Commissioner Salemi and the chairman on the course of action. I believe what the work's being done is being very good. I, for one, would, and I've expressed this to the chairman, that we see whatever management has seen in terms of the responses from our employees, if we were to get the okay, say, from the unions or something, because I understand the privacy concerns, but it's privacy concerns all around. I would think if management could see it, so should we. But again, I would defer to the union on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to speak on it that often, but honestly, I don't see what I'm looking for as questions. I don't have a list of questions. I don't have any, really. What I wanted to see was a presentation of the data, what happened with it. And I'm not looking for anything that suggests that it needs confidentiality. I'm not even asking for that. I'm asking for basically for an understanding of basically for an understanding of what the report has told us. Like Scott said, there were 4 major areas that it addressed. Okay, what are they, and what did they address them? That's really, I think that would help me a lot and help me feel like it was worth spending the money on it. And we developed something that the staff and we can use and the commission can use to actually work together with our employees. So that's, if we can get a presentation, and if we can get something in writing, just even if it's a PowerPoint thing in writing, it would give me, I think, everybody an understanding of where the study went and what management has gotten from it to work with the employees. I don't know what that is yet, so that's all I'm trying to say. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Mr. Patel?
Yes, sir. Before I get basically rude, you keep repeating the same person frequently. And forgive me for that, because I feel insulted by doing what attitude. Number one, I want to understand from you that are we looking for administration to summarize, or are we looking for somebody else to summarize? Or did we all get the report? Some copies, some form? Did we?
If I may answer that?
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, Commissioner, as you know, we did present, Amazing Workplace did present the findings of the report. The additional information, we haven't looked, my staff hasn't looked at the information, the essay information, I think that we've talked about on a number of occasions. So we haven't looked at that. What we have looked at is, Amazing Workplace has given us a breakdown of the categories of information and what are the issues, but at a, not at a high level, but not at a detailed level. We haven't seen that. So they're giving us enough information to say, communication, as an example. What does that mean? Well, it could mean communication that you're not having proper communication between employees and staff, or communication between employees and supervisors. And then our job is working with Amazing Workplace. You're right, they're working for us for a year. Our job is working with management at all different levels and with the employees to actually develop action plans to address those issues raised in the report, and then give feedback to the employees so that they feel like their issues are being addressed as part of the survey. John, we offered to have the information given to the commissioners last meeting.
The Amazing Workplaces presentation? Yeah, that
No,
was.
no, not the presentation. The results of the survey. We gave a hard copy?
Yeah, we had hard copies available, and I've emailed it to all commissioners.
We did. Okay, so and then the additional information, that we received from Amazing Workplace, has that all been given to the commissioners?
Broken down into more detail?
Yeah.
No.
Okay, so we absolutely can provide that information, and that it's not going to give you insight to someone said this or someone said that. The thing I would caution you with unions is the unions are represented by their officers, okay? And so, as you can imagine, the 67% of people who filled out the form and who are participated, some of those people don't want their essay information reviewed publicly, mainly because they're concerned about their supervisor. Now, the supervisor may not be management. It could be another union. So we don't want to put unions against each other. We don't want this union employee worried about their union supervisor. And so they don't want their information shared. They want it addressed, but they don't want it shared. Then you have union leadership that might, at least I know of one union leadership, that wants access to all of this information, which isn't fair, because the reason why we got 67%, 70% of the employees were satisfied and or happy, very happy, is because they trusted the process. But if we open up and I don't think it's the responsibility of the union to decide whether or not we can look
Mr.
at.
Chairman, my question was not that much detail. Question was, what information we have, and we read it, and we generalize what, and you generalize what you are doing, and then you can represent some step by step. Here is this area, this is what we are doing, this is what we are doing, and that's it.
Yes, we'll provide that.
Well,
Don't assume anything, and there is no need for anybody to assume. We can interpret our ways, we can discuss on our own.
It's
and-
what I said from the beginning, Commissioner, so, and I don't know why we keep turning, I think there's a misunderstanding. I didn't say anything about the SA stuff, and I'm not looking to get that. What I'm trying to understand is, and, yeah, you made the presentation and the hard copy of the survey, but I read it. I probably spent more time looking at it than I should have, with all the other things I have to do in my life, but, I basically went through it because it was important. We spent a lot of time, we spent almost a year and a half trying to develop, because I went back through all the meeting minutes, trying to develop a climate survey. So,
October of
climate
23.
study. So what I'm asking for is basically, I have the report, but I'm asking for the consultant to explain to us the way they've explained to you and your staff, Scott, what does it mean? I'm not asking them to tell me what this guy said or that guy said.
Happy to do that.
We got to stop talking about that.
We're happy to do that.
Please, so
We are
can,
happy, we are happy to do that. That is not a problem. Just, understand that there's a lot of work to be done here, and we're not there yet. So, but we're happy to bring in the consultant and let the consultant say to you what I have just said, or however they want to say it. We're planning on having the consultant do the same thing for staff. They have produced the videos. Trying to get every employee in the same room is almost impossible, right? Because of shift coverage and things. So the one concern employees had was, okay, I gave you this information. I'm asking for you to do something about it, address it some way, somehow. How do I know that you're going to address it if you're not going to review the essay, right? The answer is the consultant has reviewed the essay, and they have given us feedback as to, okay, here's what we think we can fix. And the consultant has said, some things you can fix, some things you can't, right? Some people just aren't happy, but the things that you can do as an organization, you should do. So we will have the consultant come in and give a presentation. You can ask any questions you like. We don't have action plans developed yet. One thing we need to do is we need to meet with all the departments together to make sure we cross-coordinated. We need to then disseminate that information to the employees that we met with and make sure they have feedback in that. And then we can come up with an action plan that we can present to the board to say, here's what we're proposing to do. And we got feedback and buy-in from the employees. I mean, honestly, I would tell you this, without saying names, without saying unions. I met with one union last week before I left for Alaska, and the union is fighting internally. And I kind of mentioned that. They're fighting internally. And then you have a solution that is going to satisfy one half of the union and upset the other half. And so that's going to be a real challenge for the union itself, for the leadership of the union. So we're going to do everything we can to address these issues. But there's some things we can't. And I just use that example. When you have a union that has issues internally, the worst thing we can do is get in the middle of that issue, right? And the worst thing we can do is get in the middle of this union's issue, and then which might affect the other two unions. So they work in synergy. The unions are not separate and distinct. You have 184 whose supervision is 1026. And solving an issue for 184 may cause a problem in the oversight of the union that oversees 184. So I just caution all of us to be conscious of that. We have to make sure we don't interfere in the union's internal issues that, and I use an example of generational issues that are real. And we have to worry about them because I don't think this body wants contractors fixing water mains or sewers in the middle of the night 20 years from now. but those issues are real internally. And I know, you know, some leadership from different unions say this is an issue, but there's two sides to the story within the union itself. So anyways, we'll get a presentation.
I don't think that first of all, I don't expect that you and your staff to solve every single problem that comes along, Scott. And then, you know, what I asked for is like a comprehensive look at the thing, tell us what the major areas of concern were, what things got developed. I'm not asking for any kind of specific stuff, but here's the point, okay? And you gave like 5 examples, Scott. I hate to give an example because it gets too specific, but you know, if, let's say, one of the issues was overtime and how we deal with overtime and so forth, that's not something I expect to get solved. I just want to know that and explain what is the issue. And then, you know, so one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight is, you know, possible an independent labor council. So, you know, I went to look at the contracts. 2 of them were signed in 2023, July, I think, of 2023. One of them was from December of 2022. So one of them is, or 2 of them are going to come up in the next year, in 2026. You're going to be negotiating these contracts beginning like, I don't know, March maybe or something of 2026. Because the end date is December 31st, 2026, okay? So now we've got this climate study. It told us some of the areas that we got to look at. So those areas, and we can't necessarily resolve by just having a meeting with the guys. Those are things that find their way into the contract negotiations, and we find a way to solve them there. We can't satisfy everybody, but we have to satisfy the board and the district, basically, that we've done a good job and made sure that we have our employees working in the best of situations. That's all we're looking for. I'm not looking for any of the specific stuff. So if we can say that, you know, at some point in the near future, we're going to get a presentation
We will.
from both the consultants and the staff about what's been communicated with respect to where the major areas of concern are, and we're pointed at, you know, trying to develop the kind of information that can lead to a solution. That's all we really need.
And I just want to add, we're just not there yet, Commissioner. We're happy to have Amazing Workplace in, and you can talk to them about whatever you have, but we're just in a fact-finding right now. Like I said, I met with 140 people so far a week ago, and I haven't had a chance to do anything with that except understand it and meet with the management team. I haven't had a chance to work with the other half, so we've got a lot of work to do. But we will get a presentation together, and when we start to develop action plans by department, then we will absolutely share those with the committee or the full board in terms of what we're proposing to do to solve some of these issues. To your point, overtime is a perfect example. Overtime is a perfect example. You'll have 184 who did in fact complain about overtime and holding leaks. I know we've had that discussion on Water Bureau Finance and PP&I holding leaks and how we deal with water main breaks. But at the same token, you've got 1026 who is making those decisions, which is a union, and there's supervision. And management and relies on 1026 to make those decisions. So we don't want to get in the middle of telling 1026 how to run their department because we have 184 staff complaining they're not getting overtime. I just give you an example. We had, about 2 weeks ago, we had 27 no calls. We called people in the union to come into a water main break, and we had 27 phone calls before someone picked up. The month before, 37. Now, if people are complaining about overtime, why aren't they picking up the phone? But that's something we should not be getting involved in at this level. That's a management issue, that's a supervisory issue, but when we start getting involved at that level, we're going to create chaos amongst the unions. So.
Scott, who suggested we're
I'm
going to
not.
get
No.
I'm just going back to that.
It's an example, but I'm just using an example. It's just an example. I'm just saying.
Yeah, but it's an example you just gave 5 times.
I repeat myself. I apologize. Yes, please.
Nobody's asked about that.
Please.
Next.
You have a question, Mr.
I
Patel?
think we are debating this unnecessary. You stop where you are.
Thank you.
We talked about it. We will review our own. Everybody will review on their own, and we'll talk about it.
Yeah,
This is too premature to go into all this detail.
I agree.
Moving on to item 7, discussion of outside labor counsel. I have some concerns, and my concerns are, quite frankly, with regards to the Barron agreement. I think that there are issues there in terms of there may be violations of law. And I think that we probably would be better served if we had outside labor counsel who specializes in that area look at that. My concern here basically is that if that is the case, and I'm not here to debate with a lawyer about whether or not something does or does not violate the law, but I think that there are statutory provisions that raise some issues. And I think, quite frankly, that we may not have been fully informed. And don't want to cast any aspersions on anyone or what have you. But I think that it rises to the level that we are better served in terms of taking a very careful look at outside labor counsel. Most municipalities do have outside labor representation. And I think that it rises to the level of concern, yes?
Most municipalities don't have internal lawyers either, and we do. For me, we have a staff. Unless the staff comes to us and say we need an external lawyer, I say we continue the way we're going. Again, that's, my town, we don't have a town lawyer. We have an external lawyer. But here we have a whole staff. I seem to be doing a good job. And again, if there's an issue that we need an independent, I would think Chris would tell us that we need it, then we talk about it. But the idea of going out and spend more money, that type of stuff, just don't think it's the right thing to do, so.
Well, I disagree with you. I think that you're wrong, and that's just.
That's all right.
Okay, and that's, I think that we do need outside labor counsel. Mr. Patel?
Right now, in my opinion, unions have their own lawyers. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yes?
Well, I want yes or no.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. So union have their representation and their lawyers. They can communicate with our lawyers if there are issues. If there are violations, they can communicate. There is no need for outside lawyers to come in and then again, lawyer after lawyer. What else are we going to get from them? Debate. And why are we paying for the debate?
Mr. Salami?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not so sure you're right about whether a municipality, I think any municipality the size of the MDC and with a workforce size of the MDC probably has labor counsel. City of Hartford, I'm pretty sure, City of Hartford has labor counsel, so.
But we have lawyers with it.
Yeah, we have, an office of the district council is what we have. And they're not only responsible for this, they're responsible for everything that happens here. And Scott, by the way, I happen to think that Scott's a great CEO. I think Scott has led us through the biggest project in Connecticut when we started it, and it's still a good project. We've had nothing more than just typical problems. Some of them, have been difficult. But his work at creating the integrated plan and sort of getting us out of the original plan, I mean, this is all, extremely time-consuming stuff. And I personally don't think that Scott needs to be part of negotiations with the unions. The CEO doesn't have to do that. I've said, I've been on negotiating teams and, you know, for a town, like for East Hartford, you know, at the time, population of 55,000 or so, you know, I mean, we weren't meeting with the CEO, we weren't meeting with the finance manager or the mayor or anything like that. So, you know, I was representing the unions. So I don't think it's that strange. I mean, for me, the last time we talked about this was at the November meeting, and it was a discussion, there was no action, and didn't come up as an agenda item in January. But, you know, it's a discussion now, and I would at least like to you know, to say, if we don't need to, if you don't want to discuss it right now, that's fine, but I would like to have, when we get to future agenda items, to try to set an agenda item to at least have someone, you know, who's knowledgeable of it, talk to us about what the cost of an outside labor council is. And we looked at what it was before, the last time we used them, but maybe that's not even relevant anymore because it's been, I don't know, 5 years since we had them or something, you know, maybe it's not relevant, the actual dollar amounts. So at least have an idea of what it would cost for that, so we can decide whether we want to have our staff spend all this time doing 3 contracts, or if we want to have, you know, Labor Council represent both the district board and management, so that what goes into those meetings comes from, the district board has some input and has an understanding that comes back to some feedback from what those, in those negotiations. That's what I would ask, and if we can have a future agenda item where perhaps our council can develop what the cost would be based on a number of hours that you might expect to spend in negotiations over the course of, 2026, and trying to negotiate those 2 contracts, and the third one comes up in 27. So if we get an estimate on that, I think I'd be more comfortable at least knowing what it would cost us to have an independent council do that for us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Adel?
Thank you. I don't also need to, hate to correct my good friend Commissioner Drake, but in Weathersfield, we do have both a town attorney and a labor attorney for both the town staff and the Board of Education. So I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
Chairman Curry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm hearing a couple different things during this discussion. The first by you indicating that maybe we've had some issues or have issues in terms of strictly following state statutes or other rules or regulations. And then I'm hearing a discussion about outside legal counsel and as it relates to negotiations for specific contracts. I want to just kind of address that first concern which you mentioned, and I would like to learn more about. I'm not asking that you indicate tonight or tell us what they are, but you know, if in fact we are not following the letter of the law, so to speak, I think we need to look at that, which would be one outside of outside counsel, or may, if in fact, if whatever the finding is, may indicate that we may need outside counsel simply because there could be a possibility of a conflict of interest. Now, as it relates to negotiations for specific contracts, I would only suggest that it's certainly within the this committee to make a recommendation to the board, but our charter indicates that district counsel is the one who has the authority to hire outside legal counsel. And that being said, should there be a conflict of interest or determined that there be one by the board, and knowing the district counsel works for the district board, then that purview for going through a process of hiring an outside legal counsel should the board determine that to be the correct action to take, would fall before that board. Thank you.
Commissioner Desai.
Commissioner
Chairman,
Desai?
oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I had similar question that Chairman Curry mentioned. So I hear concerns. So I think at least I'm trying to figure out what those concerns are, and are the concerns related to staff of the MDC? That's one, or are the concerns related to the board? So I think just understanding, what the issue is so that we can address it properly and take appropriate motions and things like that, so, and have proper scope of work. So that's what I would say. That's the comment I have. Thank you.
First on the, about negotiations, I heard Commissioner Curry sort of separate the thing into maybe two separate issues. But for instance, and this is an observation, okay? And it's not anything more than that, but we signed contracts in July of 2023. And for the next year and a half, I'd have to turn to HR and ask them to tell us how many job descriptions and upgrades have come to this committee for restructuring or whatever. I mean, we just signed a contract. Why in the course of the next year or so after we signed a contract are we doing that many of these things? I just,
Can I answer your question?
Shouldn't have that, but my question is, shouldn't have that have been addressed in the contract negotiations, so, I mean, all I could say is that, somebody that's sort of bills themselves as a labor counsel and familiar with, the labor laws in Connecticut, which are pretty specific. I mean, it's not just a general practice. There's people that, and like I said, the city of Hartford, I'm sure, has one. All the major municipalities have labor counsel. It's a specific area of practice. I'm just suggesting that, if that was done with someone who does that and only that for a living, then I'd say that I'd be more comfortable with it. But like I said, it was just an observation. And I think that the conversation that started in this is surrounded by labor law, and I think that's what the chairman was saying. But he can explain it. For me, that, we want to make sure that anything that transpires here that has to do with labor law or anything related to it, that we're in, compliance with it. So I think that was the only comment.
And if I can answer that.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, so as you know, the whole purpose for the climate survey was to be better. And we're constantly making ourselves better. So we're constantly making changes to make ourselves better. So if you would suggest that we're going to, with an outside labor counsel who doesn't understand the MDC at all, doesn't understand the inner workings of the departments, the reason why we're so effective in the 2015 multitasking job description was because I and my staff clearly understand the day-to-day workings of the MDC. Outside counsel is not going to understand that. But we're constantly making ourselves better, and besides that, the union contracts require it. So if someone says, I want to be upgraded, there's a union contract that says you must consider that, and then we would bring that to PPI. But we're constantly, Commissioner, trying to make ourselves better and more efficient. And that's why you might have a contract. And if you look back in history, we'll give you the statistics of after a contract signing, how many times we brought job description upgrades to this committee and to the full board. So I wouldn't suggest that that's the reason, because that's been a very consistent process for 19 years that I've been here. As it relates to the chairman's comments about Mr. Barron and the agreement that was developed with Mr. Barron, The agreement that was developed with Mr. Barron, I've been here 19 years, and the prior district council had done multiple agreements like that. It's a very common thing. This isn't something new with Mr. Barron. We have done this multiple times. As you can remember, with the layoffs in 2012 because of CRA, almost every employee that left under that layoff or that a retirement signed these agreements. So that's very consistent. We've been very consistent. We have done nothing different than we've done for other positions. So the answer is, I understand your point, but to say that Bob Barron's agreement was something out of the ordinary, it was not. It was something that was done with this district council, with the prior district council on numerous occasions. And then if I would say that union negotiations, I think the commissioner said it well. The unions have they have lawyers that represent them in negotiations. The chairman appointed, I believe, Commissioner Cal Torres to that committee representing the board in the next union negotiations. That was a board decision to have a commissioner sit on the next set of negotiations with the unions. So I would only suggest that, the reasons why you're suggesting we need it, I'm not sure. I took over negotiations in 2015, and it's when we got union multitasking job descriptions. The Labor Council prior to that was not involved, and we had outside Labor Council, as you know, years ago, helping us with specific issues associated with terminations or those kinds of things. But in terms of union negotiations, the best entity to negotiate with the union is the CEO and HR and our management staff, because we are the people that understand the day-to-day issues associated with how to make the organization better. A outside labor council is only going to say to me or to my staff, tell me what to do, because I don't know anything about how the MDC internal workings work. So we'll have to educate an outside attorney when we have a district council, which the board approved district council, the board approved district clerk council, and together as a team, we work together. The last union contract was excellent. Everybody's happy, right? 70% of the employees are happy, right? And I forgot the numbers, but if you look at 184, very small percentage of the people were unhappy about the union contract. Jimmy, do you have those numbers? 150, came right from the union. 150 people were positive, 30-something were negative. 184, 1026, very similar. The point is, I don't see the need for outside counsel, except for maybe some people in the union are complaining about the fact that they're not getting what they want. That's my concern.
Scott, excuse me, but, I don't know how you get to that. First of all, this is a discussion for the commissioners to have. I think you've let us know that you don't think that we need, but it's up to the commissioners to decide whether they think we need them or not.
Agreed.
But, to say that this is about the unions, I mean, I asked because, I come to all the PP&I meetings. And, I saw a lot of upgrades and job description things change shortly after and I'd have to say that you wouldn't ask for that. If everybody was happy, they wouldn't be asking for that. I'm not saying that they were angry. I'm just saying that they felt there was something left that they needed to do after the contract. I'm not even saying that a labor council could resolve all these things without obviously they have to talk to you and to your HR staff and to other folks here. There's no question about it. But they do the negotiations. They do the face-to-face negotiations. So, I think there's a big difference when that happens. But that's something I wanted to talk to commissioners about. I understand that, that there are commissioners and that their staff here thinks that maybe it's not necessary. All I'm asking for is how much would it cost to do that? And can we at least consider doing it? That's all.
Chairman.
I've been listening here, and so I'd like to move that we adjourn the PPI meeting.
That's amending the agenda. You can't do that. It's a special meeting. That, in effect, you're asking that we can't do that. We have to complete the agenda.
That's,
Can you repeat your request? What was it?
Can adjourn?
I'm calling for a vote, that's all.
Okay.
you'd need a second.
What was it?
It was a motion to adjourn.
It just,
Motion to adjourn.
well, don't you just want to end this discussion, finish up the last?
No, he wants to adjourn the meeting.
I don't know.
So the motion is on the floor. Is there a second?
Motion to adjourn. Second it.
Okay. Let's have a vote. All those in favor of adjourning? Aye. If you say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
I heard for the ayes, Commissioner Avedisian, Patel, and Magnan. Were there any other in favor?
Aye.
That's Commissioner Desai. So for aye, I have Commissioner Avedisian, Patel, Magnan, and Desai. And for nay, I had Salemi and Taylor. And did I hear a nay over there? No? No. For nay, I had Commissioners Salemi and Taylor.
Curry's a nay.
Is there anyone else that voted in opposition to adjourn? So it was 4-3 in favor.
Curry is a nay.
Commissioner Lesser's a nay.
Okay. 4-4. It doesn't carry.
Curry is a nay.
Yes, Commissioner Curry, I have you.
Thank you.
All right.
Who had the floor? Was it Commissioner Patel?
So can you tell us what the total is?
4-4.
Mr. Patel, you had the floor?
Basically, we are debating too much without any control on agenda. Let's remain on agenda, assign some time, and only people, repeat people who like to talk. Don't let them talk. And that's one thing I believe. Second thing is that why employees are going to only certain commissioners for complaining? Can you give me the answer? You mentioned somebody came to you just now, right?
What?
You
You're
did
gonna have
say-
to say that again. What?
Why employees go to only certain commissioners to quote unquote grieve?
I didn't say anybody came to me. Nobody's complaining to me. I'm asking for, nobody complained to me. I'm asking about this because in the negotiations that I was a part of, there was labor council involved on both sides. There was an attorney for the unions, and an attorney for the municipality or the state of Connecticut, whichever part I was in. There were, and because labor law is very specific, and this is not a small organization. We have 400 what's the total now? 440 employees, 450
71.
employees.
No,
So that's all I'm asking. I'm not saying that we have to do it. I'm asking for what the value of it would be, what would it cost us? And do we at least want to consider doing that? The other issue that came up in this discussion was about, I believe, Scott mentioned this, Bob Barron. I didn't hear anybody else mention the name, but Scott did.
Chairman did.
I'm not complaining about that. I do think that there's a question about that, and I do think that Scott, remembers that there were agreements. I remember the most famous one was not a separation agreement, and so that was for our former chief financial officer. That was not a separation agreement. So, and I read the statute, and I can read that it's a FOI statute. And it specifically says that you can't have confidential agreements. So I don't know how, we can say that it's okay. I don't know of any that were done in the past, certainly never brought to the commission to ask them or explain it to them. So anyway, I don't think adjourning the meeting is going to do any good, but I'm certainly willing to, get to the next agenda item if we have to. What I said before was that I'd like to schedule, an agenda item where we have some estimate of what the cost of council would be, and then we can discuss whether, we think that there's value in that or not. I didn't ask for anything more than that. So if somebody still wants to talk, that's okay with me, but that is
I'd like to move to
I'm
item,
asking that we just make it an
unless
agenda
anyone
item.
disagrees, I'd like to move to item 8 on the
No, I
agenda.
don't get to talk?
Well,
Everybody's
I
talked a hundred
mean,
times.
well, first you want to talk, then you don't want to talk, then
No,
you
I
want to
wanna talk.
adjourn.
I don't
Right? What do you
want to
want?
end the agenda, but I want one, we have attorneys, Commissioner Drake, we have attorneys. I'll be honest with you, I don't care what an outside independent attorney costs. I'd like to ask Chris if he could come back and tell us if he needs an attorney or not. He's our attorney. You're not one. None of these guys are, I'm not one. If Chris needs an attorney to do what he needs to do, we pay him a fair amount of money to tell us if we need an attorney or not. So Chris, I ask this, if you could look at this subject, if we need one, tell us if we need one. I wouldn't go through the exercise for how much one costs. I don't care how much one costs right now. I want to know if we need one. So I'd like to end this agenda item, like they said, move on, but ask Chris if he could come back and tell us if he needs one. If Chris shows up at a meeting one day and says, I need an attorney to do this, I'm going to listen to the guy. We pay him a lot of money. But other than that, I'm not listening to anybody else. And if he screws up a bunch of times over and over again, we got to get a new attorney. I'm just saying, Chris is our guy. We pay him a fair amount of money. Chris, you should tell us if we need one or not. If you don't think we do, not now,
No,
but I'm just saying,
I'm
come
not
back
gonna-
and,
If I might, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I would like to move this on.
I'd like to move on
Since
too.
Give me 5 minutes.
since everyone is in such a hurry to finish, all of a sudden, now we want to open it up.
I didn't
No,
have,
no,
I didn't
no.
have an opportunity to vote on the
Yeah,
adjournment
yeah.
motion, but, so,
Well,
don't count me amongst
well,
everybody.
Well, you're not a
right?
commissioner,
Oh, don't
you're a
count-
staff.
But don't count me amongst everybody who wanted to get this over with.
Yeah.
Can I have 5 minutes?
Well,
Thank you. First of all, the statute doesn't say that you can't have a confidentiality agreement. It says that if there is a confidentiality agreement in a separation agreement, it doesn't make the agreement not disclosable. It's not exempt from disclosure under the FOI statute. That's what it says. I just want to go through a couple things, and just facts, not taking a position in one way or the other. But I've had HR staff, thank you, Jamie, for your work on this, go through since 2012 the number of grievances that have been filed against the MDC. In 2012, there were 113, and that was the CRA separation year. So that's why that number is extraordinarily high, and that's probably out of the, shouldn't even be considered in terms of averaging. But since that time, the highest number of grievances that have been filed in any one given year was 59. That was in 2016. In 2000, and then it's been going down, some blips in the screen, but down to, in 2024, there were 8 grievances filed against the MDC. My office, largely through John's work and John's consultation with me, we meet once a week on all legal matters, including grievances. He has some pending grievances, and I will distribute the list here, so I don't have to go through the whole list, Mr. Chairman, the list of the grievances that have been handled by my office since 2022. You'll see the type of grievance, the nature of the grievance, the result, whether they settled before arbitration, whether they were the subject of arbitration, all the information that you would otherwise hopefully be interested in determining whether, in fact, you need an outside labor counsel. And finally, I will tell you, I'll be the first to admit that I don't know the rules about meal allowances for 184, 1026, and 3713. I don't know the rules about shoe allowances, clothing allowances, overtime this, overtime that. But I do know who does know all the inner workings of the MDC. It's Scott, his staff, Chief Operation Officer, Kelly Shane is the Chief Administrative Officer. They know the inner workings of the MDC. And quite frankly, whether it's 2016, 2020, or 2023, 22, 23, 24, excuse me, when the contracts were being negotiated, but for the fact that they knew all the inner workings and were able to go back and forth with the unions, who also know all those inner workings, and reach an agreement, not an not arbitration award, but agreement on all three of those contracts, and all three of those contract years is a credit to them. It's a credit to you and the board in terms of considering those contracts, giving us and Scott direction initially on where you'd like to be, giving us guidance on where we'd like to be, and then going through the contracts and approving those contracts in each of those years. So you all deserve the credit, not just Scott and his staff, but in terms of getting down into the weeds and into the finer points of negotiation, you were in no better hands than with him and his staff. And quite frankly, even before that, with Chuck Sheehan and other CEOs that I've dealt with in the past, they were equally adept at that. So thank you for that time, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I read the Bob Barron separation agreement. It's titled separation agreement, and it does have non-disclosure and, non-disparagement, non-disclosure clause in it. I don't know. It seems to me that, it was basically written to end an argument or something. That's certainly what it looks like to me. And I'm not suggesting, and I've said this, actually, we've had this conversation. I'm not suggesting that we change it or do anything about it, but I am asking that, that we not talk about how in the past, I think, the ones you described with CRA had nothing to do with behavior stuff or anything on it. I mean, the reason that this became an issue for me was I can read, and I read the newspaper articles when Bob first came here, and that there was an issue with a former employee, and it was in a newspaper. I'm not making this up. So, I just had a question about it. But that agreement says there's a non-disparagement clause in it. It looks to me like it's confidential. And I don't understand how you can say that the statute says that you can't have this non-disclosure, so it's in there.
It doesn't say that. It
Gentlemen,
doesn't say that.
gentlemen,
And I'll leave it
look,
at that.
I'm
It
going to
doesn't
cut
say
this
that.
off. Let's move to item 8 so we can move this along.
There you go.
Item 8,
Good evening, Commissioners. Jamie Harlow from Human Resources. Agenda 8, vacancies, job title classification, and open postings. We currently have approximately, it's always kind of a moving target with closing and opening vacancies, but we have about 15 active recruitments representing both union and non-union jobs. The vast majority of the jobs that we have are posted open, meaning that they're posted both within the district internally and external. The one bargaining unit that is different is 184. We generally post internal before we go external, with a few exceptions. So we do have a number of positions open at this time at various stages of the recruitment process. If you have any specific questions about that, I can address that as well.
any questions? Thank you.
Okay, and then item B is resignations, retirements, and terminations. I have represented the information for both January and February. We had 5 new hires in January, 1 in February. In terms of promotions, internal promotions, we had 2 in January, 1 in February. We had 2 retirements in February. And then we had 1 resignation in January and 1 in February. Both were newer employees that ultimately left for, more flexibility or to change career paths.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks.
Item 9, opportunity for general public comments.
Good evening, Commissioners. Chris McClellan, President of 184. I did want to clarify one thing that Scott had brought up with the call log with the 20-something employees that missed the call. Both times, the employees that were on call were not called, which would make it go down a list. Had those two employees had gotten called, they would have never went that far. Grievances were issued. The district did uphold them and paid the employees that missed the call. So I want to clarify that. 184 members are there for you guys. We're on call every weekend. We have never left you guys without coverage. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Once again, opportunity for general public comments. Item 10, Commissioner requests for consideration for future agenda items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to ask for agenda for this committee that staff will bring or get together the solicitation for a new CFO. And I understand that there are other positions that in finance that we may need to be working on as well. The audit's right in front of us, but my concern really is for the Board of Finance, the budget deliberations will begin at the end of June, somewhere around there in July. And, you know, I'd like to see if there's a chance we can get these employees. I know Scott does too. He wants to try to fill these positions on the way there. So can we have that as an agenda item at our next PPI meeting that either we'll have it out and advertised already, or we'll have it for us to see, one or the other. And for the second, I would ask that we have at least, you know, some idea of what the cost to our own, if you want to ask, you know, Council Stone, you know, what the cost might be to his office to prepare for the negotiations. We can take a look at that and see how many hours that you think that we'll have to devote to the negotiations and try to come up with a value for that. We can at least talk about what it costs for us to do that. And that would be an agenda item for the next meeting as well.
One item that I would like to have on the next agenda is the management study.
I just, Mr. Chairman, I just had a point of inquiry, and that is Commissioner Salemi has requested this item be placed on the agenda, and I just wanted to know if that's going to happen. Not that I endorse the idea of outside counsel, but is the discussion going to take place at the next meeting?
We'll have to discuss that.
So the request, a request to place a subject matter on the next agenda item, is that something that is taken under advisement by the chair, or is that something that the chair grants the commissioner?
I can take it under advisement, I can grant it, and I can not put it on. But usually as a matter of courtesy, if it is something that really falls within the purview of the committee, it's put on. Once again, any other requests for future agenda items? There being none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.